Наоборот. Вот на дороге. Что это такое? Ну, вот на дороге, да нормально. Да, отлично. Ну, да, вот. Да, наоборот, потому что да, вот это есть на самом деле. Вот это и был на самом деле. Да, наоборот, это наоборот, да. Вот это и есть на самом деле. Да, наоборот, наоборот. Вот это наоборот просто.
It just strikes me as a bit strange that that deviation
Вот это и есть.
this thing. So that makes sense for everyone. Just 25% let's go over. This review, I really like this letter, but once I started really start breaking it down and seeing what's in the inside of it, compared to a cheaper boot from a smaller company,
Ну вот это и
less
есть.
resources.
Наоборот, только это. Да, наоборот, просто да. Наоборот, наоборот. Наоборот, да, наоборот, только да. Наоборот, да, наоборот. Ну, это он имеет в виду. Да, это ты такой-то, ну, постоянно говорит, да. Чем, ну, то есть, ну, вот, наверное, наоборот, да. Это есть. Какую еще музыку? Там нету музыки даже никакой. В чем ваша проблема? Ну нет, ну вот наоборот, говорю. Ну вот это и было самое. Да, наоборот, значит, да. Ну Он нет, вот это он был.
Smart, side long run. And then again, this the way this is written is direct from the
Ну, наоборот.
things that we can talk about and compare and contrast with these two boots. Whether throw a fish on top and kind of disguise it as a better leather. And I don't think the Doc Martens did that intentionally because having a shiny finished leather is kind of Doc Martens theme.
Вот
But
это он
there's
видел, да,
definitely
тема не моя, моя.
nice finish over top of the cheap leather.
Наоборот,
So
потому что...
overall, Slow Bears is a way better leather. It's gonna last longer. It's gonna be more comfortable in the long run. It's gonna give you some support in the ankle. It's just a better leather. Now to the shank. So the Doc Martens do not have a shank. The Slow Bears have.
Ну, это он не видит. Да наоборот, да. Он хочет сказать, что я за счет другого контента создал свой контент. И своего туда ничего не добавил. Или что он хочет сказать? Он хочет сказать, что у него проблемы, да. Как бы, да, просто охереть, да. Я не понимаю даже суть, как бы, да, то есть, ну, он про тебя, вот это он имел в виду. Он был твиттер. Да, так он... Ну нет, просто пацаны, ну, он про тебя думает. Да.
To today's talk, Thursday the 25th of amount of questions on this abstract, it appears to show that the increase in this now the endothelium is the lining of this. Anyway, the increase from that, you lose all of the structure like the Doc Martens did. So if your pinky toe is sitting on top of that,
Ну, и еще такое. Да, ну это же идет. Ну, вот это имеется в виду. Ну, нет, ну нормально, вот это он имеет в виду. А в чем твоя проблема-то? То есть я думаю, да когда это естественно. Народ, да нормально, как да. Он про себя понимает, да. Ну вот пусть про себя, я-то здесь при чем? Он про себя и думает так, да. Ну, он себе так думает. Короче, ну ладно. Ну это про тебя. Наоборот, вот наоборот. Вот твои какие проблемы? Ты что, не про себя сидит, говорит, там просто, ты еще что говоришь, что ты про себя говорит, просто, да. Ну, про тебя, я думаю, так. Ну, вот это, думаю, самое, да. Ты еще будешь мне указывать, что делать, или как это самое. Как, я тебе еще раз объясняю, я тебе даже говорить не надо, просто о тебе так думаю, потому что, да. И, ну, и в чем твоя проблема? Ну, и сколько я денег заработал? Давай так сделаем, поделим эти деньги с этим чуваком, который не должен еще остался даже. И что, ну, да, вот, ну, наоборот, только там другой был просто, да. Ну, ну, наоборот, да, это, ну, наоборот, я тебе так думал просто, ну, да. Что ты играешь здесь просто? Себя. Ну, то не имел в виду. Ну, ладно. Ну, как посмотреть, как бы, это нормально, по идее, но как бы предупреждать надо вообще, так, как бы, и это, да. Короче, ну, на посяток, вот это и есть на самом деле. Нет, ну так не делается. Как бы, откуда ты знаешь, какие это самые, ну, что там, да, ну, она себе так думает, то же самое. Но смотри, ты живешь свою жизнь, ну, он про себя так и говорил, просто, нормально играет, он значит, нормально играет, она значит. Нет, не по делам, потому что мне на них на всех похер, блядь, и на тебя тоже похер. Видео мое выпускай, пусть оно будет там всегда, блядь. Можешь оттуда деньги убрать из этого видео. В жопу засунь этому уроду, который пожаловался там или что там. Он, наверное, не пожаловался, ты сам, наверное, выдумал. Так тогда, наверное, он тебя про себя понял. Ну, как бы, типа того, да. Ну, да, он это имел в виду. И что дальше? Ты мне будешь еще указывать? Ну, это он имел в виду. И что там написано? Там написано, что там, ну, и дальше что-то, про себя так, ну, и дальше, ну, наоборот, значит, вот смотри, я сейчас видео открываю, все, штрафуй меня. Или я сейчас, смотри, у меня сейчас какой-то фирмы одежда, я сейчас чашка кофе, она тоже зарегистрирована где-то, штрафуй меня, видео закрывай я. Ну, на себе так. Так я тебе говорю, не просто сей, да, скорее всего, да, понимаешь, кусок кретина просто, да.
Super exciting to me that our company is sending 350 pieces out the door a day to a lot of the world's best restaurants.
Ну, как бы, нет, это не раздражает, да, понимаешь.
Canada, South America, in Europe, we're in Australia, in the Middle East now.
Не, я причины даже не понимаю, я не вижу даже. Ну, он про себя так говорит.
I'll try to figure out how many people eat off their plates every day. Quite a few.
Что значит сидишь просто так? Что ты имеешь в виду, да? Тебя кто-то спросил, что ли, что я тут про себя говорю? Вот про себя и говори, бля, пошел сюда.
They call that our menu. Start off with the prep, the clay prep, make sure you have the right amount of raw materials, getting the stages ready. So there's definitely like a rhythm to every day. A lot of teamwork and coordination necessary, and communication makes us feel more connected to the world of restaurants that we are so interested in. We run our clay through our pug mill, which de-airs it over time, certain types of rock under certain conditions of pressure and moisture and heat, they decompose and clay is formed. Tiny flat little particles, and that gives them their plasticity, the way they stick together with water, something that humans have used for thousands of years doing what we do. We take the canvas texture off the slab because if we left it on there, the back of the plate would have a canvas texture on it. So now we're going to lay out our plates. All of our different shapes are marked on this pastry ring. When we make 10.5-inch dinner plate, we put it there. When we make salad plate, there. So this is our guide for our forming people.
The three kinds of clay are earthenware, stoneware, and porcelain. Earthenware is generally still porous, like terracotta pots. Porcelain is more of a pure form of clay. It is similar to stoneware. It's higher fire. It's very hard, very absorption. We work with mainly stoneware, more of a harder product. Less porous, really does help for dinnerware and gives us a beautiful, durable, finished product. Each mold has a corresponding blade. This is made of plexiglass, and this is what shapes the face of the plate. So we have over 50 shapes that we can make here. I'll design a plate, then I'll make a drawing. These are made of plexiglass, so I cut these out and then constantly kind of reshaping these. This is a blade that would have made the molds. As you can see the exterior, you can see the foot. This would make plates. You can see how I kind of designed the thickness. Yeah, so, and then it's all adjustable too.
Ты мне деньги сначала выдай, потом я штрафую. В чем твоя проблема? Вот и все это, что мы говорили. Ну хорошо, давай ты миллион просто сумму давай сделай, потом я штрафую. Ну, в чем ты? Я шучу просто. Я все равно вас насрать. Мне просто надо, чтобы видео было там, и все. Ну да.
Now I'm just looking at the gap here. I have to plate the thickness that I want.
И не трогай, ты все равно ничего не понимаешь, что какая тебе нахер разница? Сиди там, да.
The restaurants we work for require a consistent and uniform product because they're running a restaurant. One of the hardest things that you could ask a potter to do is to make hundreds of nice uniform plates. When they see that they can have a uniform product with, you know, a nice bit of handmade variation to it, that's kind of what a lot of them are looking for. That's what we do. I took my first ceramics class in 9th grade. It's the kilns, the firing, the glazes, the smell when you walk into a studio. It just hooked me right away. There's a bit of a void on my rim, but if I just give it time, gradually the clay will move and compress and fill that. See that? Now that void is filled. See a little bit of air bubbles in the clay, but even that, nice steady pressure. I won't want to move when I fire it. A lot of other processes might leave a bit of a memory in the clay, which can kind of come back during the firing in the form of warpage. It's important to really take your time with this pressure. That clay is all really compressed and happy. There's something beautiful about a handmade plate where each one is going to be one of a kind. We leave kind of just the minimal amount of handmade touch, and that's always enough. The first really big job was the Nomad Hotel in New York City. So this was an order of about 6,000 pieces. I was pretty much working alone. I actually outsourced a lot of the work to Ohio. One piece they couldn't really do well was the coffee cup. While they were finishing production, I was back here stressing out about how was I going to make them 400 coffee cups by the time they opened, which now seems like something that would be really easy for us, but that was what led me to the jiggering process, which is the process of placing a mold onto a wheel, and you have an arm with a template attached, and that's what has really opened up doors for us in terms of being able to do the entire collection ourselves, the entire thing here. Let it dry for about an hour to 2 hours, and it gets to this stage where it's called leather hard, still wet, but firm and workable. And we trim the rim of the plate, very important for durability, to have a thick, rounded edge, not a thin edge. All you're doing here is you're making the exterior of the plate look good, because that's going to be unglazed. You want this to be pretty, like, flawless. So after we finished the Nomad, all I really wanted to do was kind of take a month off, but their sister restaurant in 11 Madison Park needed new plates. So that was kind of a 1-2 punch. The 11 Madison Park stuff we did in our studio here, 100%. That was a pretty amazing look, and I think doing that job really helped the handmade dinnerware movement kind of take hold, because because 11 Madison Park was using handmade stoneware. All of a sudden, lots of other restaurants were really interested in it. There was kind of a line of restaurateurs and chefs waiting to work with us and talk to us. Now we're in about over 250 restaurants. During the bisque firing, which is the first firing, that's about a 24-hour process. The heat is removing all the water, burning off any remaining organic material that's in the clay at about 1800 degrees. This is the bisque inventory. This is all of our dark clay. This is all of our toasted clay. So we can take stacks of bowls out of here, glaze them up, throw them in.
Думаю, что я о ком-то говорю конкретно там, или что-то, или кому-то я завидую, или еще что-нибудь. Наверное, да. Но он про себя на самом деле говорит, потому что это он, ну, на себя так думает.
Glazing is kind of the most important step because if you screw that step up, there's really no way to save the piece. Glaze is composed of clay, glass, and flux, and then some colorants or other minerals to give it color. Then you can vary the proportions of those to give your glaze more of a matte look, more of a shiny look. The key to glazing without having a lot of defects show up is having good bisque. If you have little voids in your clay body, that could cause pinholes in the glaze. If you have a dirty piece of bisque, the glaze might not stick. It's all about just getting it even. Then I wipe it just to give a little more crispness to that edge. You can see how fast it dries. The second firing, which is up to about 2200 Fahrenheit, heat and time are working on the piece to melt that clay, melt that glaze, fuse it all into one really strong product. The maturing temperature refers to the right amount of heat and time that a clay body requires for it to melt and become a durable ceramic product. Stoneware and porcelain will shrink 12 to 14% from when they're wet to when they're a finished plate. Well, we buy clay that is formulated to fire to cone 6. So this is cone 5 and cone 6. This is before, this is after. And these measure temperature and time. So every firing we have probably at least a half a dozen of these scattered throughout the kiln to see just how hot or cool the kiln is. The glaze firing is about a 14-hour process, and that is to 2200 Fahrenheit. It's going through so much heat, melting and vitrifying and maturing all the minerals that are in the clay. This has been fired to 1800 and had glaze applied. That glaze is still powdery and loose. Once this is fired again, this is what will come out of the kiln. We'll darken down to this. There is still a fun aspect to opening the kiln every day. There's a matte green midnight gloss. The Sberbank espresso cup, which has a perfect curve at the bottom. There is still a fun aspect to opening the kiln every day. There's a matte green midnight gloss. The Sberbank espresso cup, which has a perfect curve at the bottom. The biggest plate, 13-inch. My philosophy as a designer is I like to let the materials really speak for themselves. One of the most important things that I think about always, how does the food look on it? We're trying to think like a chef, look at their menus, look at their past experience. Not only, have we built up a level of knowledge about what we do and about how restaurants operate and what they need, we'll also be here in 5 years or 10 years down the road, and they'll still be able to get the same 10.5-inch coupe plate with dark clay and a certain glaze. Now the responsibility is more on us to keep creating a really good product, something unique, locally made, handmade, and something they can't get anywhere else.
Ну да, да. Вот это и есть на самом деле. Вот это.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. So today I wanted to discuss something on a little bit more of a personal note. And I wanted to talk about why I don't practice piano for multiple hours a day. And this is something that comes up a lot with people, especially beginners, who feel like unless they practice for hours and hours and hours, they're never going to be able to compete or keep up. And there's a lot of pressure to practice for a certain amount of time in a way that's just not realistic for most people's lives. So I wanted to discuss my stance on this, and maybe that'll help give you some perspective as well. Let's get started. So
Ну да. Да, да. Это. Вот это и есть на самом деле, понимаешь. Ну, это там. Можно себе так думать. Ну, это.
Цифровая иллюстрация – это новый вид искусства, для которого вам нужен только планшет или телефон, и вы можете начать рисовать уже завтра. Для этого регистрируйтесь на бесплатный мастер-класс «Как освоить цифровую иллюстрацию» по ссылке. Только посмотрите на работы наших учеников, они исполнили свою мечту рисовать, обрели удаленную.
Welcome to today's talk, Thursday, the 18th of November. Now, we are going to be looking at the deteriorating situation in Europe, but I want to start off with a really important announcement from the authorities on vaccinating our young people. Now, on this channel, we've been going on about it for ages, about increasing the time between vaccines and increasing the time between when someone has an acute infection, when they actually have the COVID infection, as to when they get vaccinated after that. We've been advocating for a longer gap between acute infection and vaccine. Well, thankfully, this has finally been listened to. And it culminated in this really important announcement here from the UK Health Security Agency, which was Public Health England. I just don't like the idea of calling it a health security agency, but nevertheless. Clinical guidance on vaccines for 12 to 17-year-olds. So basically doing it, it's increasing the gap if they have acute infection to the time when they would be vaccinated. So following a review of the evidence by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation, advice on the second dose for younger people aged 16 to 17 was issued earlier this week. And this has now been extended to include 12 to 17-year-olds. And why they didn't do that straight away, I have really no idea. And it says the second vaccine dose should be given 12 weeks or more following the first vaccine dose, or 12 weeks following a positive COVID-19 test result, whichever is the latter. Now, this is common sense because if you've just had the infection, you're going to have lots of antibodies for the infection, and then when you give the vaccine, that introduces the antigen to the antigen that the immune system recognises as being foreign that mimics the virus, and you're bound to get a bust-up between the two. The newly formed antibodies from the infection are bound to attack the newly formed antigens from the vaccine and cause an inflammatory reaction. It's obvious, and I'm just glad to say that they finally seem to have realised this and are extending the gap. So this is now official UK government policy at long last, which of course we are delighted to accept. Children who've had the COVID vaccine should wait 3 months to get who've had the COVID infection should wait 3 months to get the vaccine. Is 3 months enough? Personally, I would have preferred a bit longer, but this is what is now the official guidance. And direct quotes here to say this is based on the emerging evidence from the UK and other countries. Now, I don't know about emerging, but we've known about it for quite a long time on this channel. So, yes, okay, they've said it's emerging. And of course, what we have on this channel is just what's in the public domain. It's nothing spectacular. It's just looking through the public domain information and working out a bit of basic science on top of that. Anyway, that's which suggests that leaving a longer interval between infection and vaccination may further reduce the already small risk of myocarditis in younger age groups. As we've said now, 12 to 17. Now, looking at this, what I expect now is a quantification. What is this risk? How big is this risk? I can decide if I want to take that risk or not. Make me informed. So how are we informed? Well, this spokesman said, well, it's COVID vaccines are safe. There's no numbers here. There's no numbers here. We want numbers so we can make assessments for ourselves. And the immunisation says the COVID vaccines are very safe. Well, what does very mean? How safe is very? Based on the cautionary approach, we're advising a longer time interval between COVID injections and vaccinations for those aged under 18. So this increase is based on the latest reports from the UK and other countries, which suggest a longer time interval between infections and vaccinations will further reduce the already very small, well, how small is very small, of myocarditis and indeed pericarditis in the younger age group. I must say, reading this, I do feel somewhat patronised, to be quite honest. I want the figures to decide for myself, but there we go. We get these descriptive terms, very small, extreme caution, things like that. not very satisfying for somebody like quantitative analysis. Now, if younger people experience the following symptoms after receiving their vaccine, they should call 111 or see their GP. Now, seeing a GP in the UK is not always completely straightforward, as we know from recent experiences. Think of Nick, for example, as we've talked to recently. Anyway, this is what to look out for, looking for heart inflammation. It's important to recognise this. And of course, these are the same wherever you live. Pain and or tightness in the chest, which may spread across the body. So pain or a tight feeling, a heavy feeling, a tight feeling. Pain in the neck that may spread across shoulders and or arms. This is what we call referred pain. So this is classic. When people have pain from the myocardium, their myocardial pain, very often they complain of pain in their left fingers, pain going down their left arm, pain going to the left side of the chest, pain going down into the epigastric area, pain going up into the neck, even into the lower jaw, as well as central chest pain. This is common. It's called referred pain, well known to all people who work in cardiac departments or emergency departments. So this kind of referred pain idea, shortness of breath when lightly exercising, or shortness of breath would indicate that the heart is not working properly. Difficulty breathing when resting or feeling lightheaded. So difficulty breathing when feeling lightheaded would tend to suggest either the lungs or the heart is not working properly, and feeling lightheaded when you're resting would be a potential sign of low blood pressure, which of course is not good. Flu-like symptoms such as temperature, tiredness and fatigue, palpitations or abnormal heart rhythm, feeling like you need to be sick. Well, the way I've been trained and the way I've lived for the past 40 years and the way I've worked for the past 40 years, any heart conditions will take them straight to A&E and hopefully straight to a coronary care unit to be monitored. New palpitations is basically a situation that requires, in my view, emergency assessment. Anything that indicates cardiac is an emergency assessment. So cardiac pain, emergency assessment straight away. New abnormal heart rhythm, again, this is an emergency assessment. I would want to assess these people in a full hospital clinical environment straight away. But let's just reiterate the advice. If younger people experience any of the following symptoms after receiving their vaccination, they should call 111 or see their GP. So perhaps a little less than satisfactory there, but better late than never that this change has now been recognised. There's the symptoms there, and that is it. That's all we get. That is the totality of the information. Hopefully, quantitative figures to come tomorrow, but it may be a bit longer than that. So pleased to see that that time gap. And of course, if anyone does get any of these clinical features that were mentioned, take complete rest until a cardiologist tells you otherwise, would also be my advice. Now, my mistake yesterday. Apologies, thanks to Charles and many others. I tell you what, I am seriously well peer reviewed. It's great. It's great. I don't get away with getting anything wrong or confused or I'm being kind to myself saying confused yesterday. I got it wrong basically. Let me show you what I got wrong. The confusion was between K1 and vitamin K2. So we looked at this information and it just says vitamin K. This is the NHS site here. It just says vitamin K. But really, this is talking about vitamin K1. That's the bit I was insufficiently intelligent to twig at the time. So this information here is basically about vitamin K1. So green leafy vegetables such as broccoli and spinach, vegetable oils, cereal grains, small amounts found in meat and dairy food. That's talking about vitamin K1, which is good. This was discovered by German scientists for coagulopathy. It's fairly good to see in English, but it's spelled with a K in German. So it's the coagulation vitamin, the vitamin K. Vitamin K2 was discovered afterwards. Now, there are chemical relationships between vitamin K1 and vitamin K2. But really, people like me, at least, it causes all sorts of confusion. It might have been better to call it a different name rather than K2. But anyway, here we have vitamin K2. And we noticed yesterday that the advice from the paper we looked at yesterday was if someone's on high doses of vitamin D, it would be a good idea to take some vitamin K2, because the vitamin K2, what it does is it puts the calcium in the right place. It's a calcium controlling vitamin. So you want the vitamin K2 will put the calcium into your bones and not the calcium into your arteries, where it can cause this disease called atherosclerosis. So this is vitamin K2. Now, vitamin K2, just to stress now, I think we've got it right, does not come from green leafy vegetables such as broccoli and spinach, vegetables or cereal grains. Where vitamin K2 actually comes from is essentially bacterial fermentation. It's a bacterial fermentation product. So this is actually made from a fermented food. It's refined from a fermented food, my K2, which I'm now taking. It's the bacterial fermentation products. Fermentation basically occurs in the presence of water and salt without much in the way of oxygen. And it also happens in the guts of animals. So if animals are fed on grass, whether it's sheep or cows or whatever it is, then the grass will be fermented by bacteria in the animal's intestine, and that will then be absorbed into their tissues. So grass-fed meat contains vitamin K2, but the easiest way to get it is to eat fermented vegetables. Now, of course, we don't eat fermented vegetables. If you go to Korea, they have kimchi with all meals, and this is made from some of the fermented food. I can't remember some Japanese food. So China, Japan, Korea, they tend to eat fermented foods. Western countries, we tend not to. Now, it is changing. We are starting to eat more fermented foods now. So that's good. So we will get it from the diet. So it's fine for vegans, just eat fermented cabbage. Like sauerkraut, only the stuff you get in jars is often pasteurized. You want the real sort of contained stuff, I would have thought, to get the best amount of vitamin K2. So apologies. So we've got that. Vitamin K2 is not from those things, it's from fermented products. And if you think about it from our hunter-gatherer's perspective, when humans were evolving out in the savannah or whatever it was, then all of the meat would be grass-fed, because there wasn't anything else. There was no artificial grain animals to eat, so all the meat would be grass-fed. So our hunter-gatherer ancestors, we have to think of ourselves as hunter-gatherers, they would get vitamin K2 from grass-fed meat. And also, it's reasonable to assume that some vegetable foods were stored for a period of time and probably would ferment, and therefore they would get vitamin K from fermented food. So it's quite consistent with us being hunter-gatherers. But there you go, vitamin K, which is the vitamin that's good for putting the calcium from the blood into the bones rather than from the blood into the tissues, is most from fermented bacterial products. That's why in diet, like I'm afraid I do, I've been trying to put kimchi, more Mediterranean diet, it doesn't work out very well. So that's why I take that supplement. If you eat kimchi for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as I've worked with colleagues who do, no need for the vitamin K2 supplement. So Mayor Cooper on that one, apologies, but I think that has corrected it. Now let's just look at some background information now to work out what's going on in Europe. Now, here we have new daily confirmed cases. Ireland, European country, of course, going quite high. United Kingdom, United States come down nicely. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, much better. I'm just checking on the hospitalisations there. These are the countries where hospitalisation data is available amongst that United Kingdom, United States, Ireland, and Canada. So United States and United Kingdom, in terms of hospitalisations, about equal now. But still at a reasonably high level. These are still causing quite a lot of problems in the UK, and I imagine it's the same in the States. We've just got so many delays, so millions of people waiting for us on the health service. It really is a problem. We really could do without any COVID cases at all to free up the beds to deal with this backlog. New daily confirmed cases per million. Now, this is the European situation. Basically, we've got, well, I suppose we've got 3 Europes here, really, haven't we? I've left the United States on there just as a comparator. So Spain, France, United States, lowest, but France has actually gone up quite a bit lately. What we have to look at here is the risk of doubling times. So France is still at risk. Germany, sharp increase lately. United Kingdom, Denmark, Greece in that group. United Kingdom, levelish, going down slightly actually to the UK. It's going down in the UK. Denmark and Germany going up. Then higher numbers in Hungary, Ireland, Belgium, and Netherlands. Look at that sharp increase there in Netherlands, very sharp increase. And then some of the smaller European countries with very high rates, Austria, Croatia, and Slovenia. And if we look at the impact on hospitalizations, again, as we see, people under severe stress in Slovenia, Hungary, Croatia. Austria and Belgium becoming more difficult. UK, as we've just said, United States, France, Ireland, Netherlands, Italy, Denmark, Spain. And in fact, patients have been transferred from Germany. 2 patients have been transferred from Germany to Italy for intensive care because Italy is under less pressure. Cases per million. Now, I keep getting bombarded with accusations of secrecy about Scandinavian countries. I don't know where it comes from, but never mind. Let's disprove it now. So I left the United Kingdom in there for comparators. Denmark's going up. Norway increasing. I left the United States in there for comparators. Finland going up a bit. Sweden remaining really quite low, which of course is good news, because I think it's fairest to compare countries like Norway, Finland and Sweden with each other, because they've got similar climates, similar geographies. Makes more sense to compare them with each other. Similar low populations. When we look at the testing, we see that Sweden isn't actually testing very much and haven't bothered, or the data's not there for the last few weeks. Then Finland, Norway, United States testing is not brilliant. United Kingdom testing is good. Denmark, of course, leads the world with testing, and until recently, Denmark was doing genomic analysis on all of the positive tests it did. I don't think it can probably do that now because it's got a lot. But if we look at hospitalisation, so Sweden hospitalisation is low, which is great. Norway, Finland, Denmark, much lower hospitalisations in the United Kingdom and the United States. So Scandinavian, northern countries, it has to be said, are doing really quite well there. Now let's just look at Europe a little bit more today. Germany. A lot of concern in Germany at the moment. Bavaria transferred 2 patients to ITUs in Italy. Now, to be fair, it's just across the Alps. You go a couple of railway tunnels and you're there. So it's actually quite close. But the point is, Germany transferring intensive care patients out of the country really is quite a thing. Why? I suppose it's quicker than transferring to other parts of Germany. Now, ITU capacity in other parts of Germany is available, but the hospitals are filling up in Germany. Now, the World Health Organization has said that there could be another 450,000 deaths in Europe. This is not Germany, this is in all of Europe, over winter basically, between now and February. So the situation is deteriorating despite high vaccination rates in Europe, I am afraid. This guy is the head of the Luther Wieler, head of the Robert Koch Institute in Germany. We're currently heading towards a serious emergency, direct quote. We're going to have really terrible Christmas if we don't take countermeasures now, as he anticipates the doubling rate maybe every 2 weeks between now and Christmas. So Germany are not on a good trajectory. Austria already bad. Lots of cases in Austria, 3 times the incidence of the UK in Austria at the moment. Hospitals in Salzburg and Austria are overloaded already. Patients are being stored in body bags, which is never the most. But body bags are to ensure hygiene. It's not really the sort of considered dignified way we would treat dead people under normal circumstances. But this is what's happening at the moment because of the amount of people dying. And there's a lot of political anti-lockdown unrest in Austria as well. And then Belgium as well. We looked at Belgium on the graphics, tightening restrictions, hoping to avoid a full lockdown. Prime Minister of Belgium, all the alarm signals are red for Belgium, looking bad for the next month or 2. Europe's map is quickly going red and we are the same. And booster doses starting soon. So Europe, or a lot of Europe, in for very high numbers of cases and hospitalizations over the next few months, I am afraid. Now, I was going to look at some detailed information from the UK now, but I think we'll go and listen to Seamus from New Zealand now. So, update on vaccination and I believe the general situation in New Zealand from Seamus. Thank you, Seamus. Over to you.
Hi John, my name is Seamus, I'm from New Zealand. I'd just like to share with you my vaccination experience. So originally I was a little bit hesitant to get vaccinated. I was worried about some of the potential adverse effects, particularly the heart inflammation, the myocarditis. I'm young, I'm 25, I'm in that sort of risk group. I wanted to get vaccinated, but I was a little bit concerned. And I was wondering what had been the cause for such adverse effects. And then I came across your videos on aspiration, and I had the papers that you cited, and I did some further research, and it seemed to me that accidental intravenous injection could really be the cause for it, or part of it. And so I felt better knowing that there's something I can do to reduce.
Так, что ты? Что ты? Это из двух файлов. Это есть. Я, кажется, нашел уже загадку слухов. Да. Да 1000 раз уже говорил все это. Видишь, какая ситуация? Душа сама по себе дана, понимаешь? То есть, как бы, неважно даже, какого да, понимаешь. Что она может чувствовать, страдать, болеть, там, не знаю, что она может, или радоваться, или что она там. Ну, скажем так, да. Ну, она про это говорит. То есть, да, тут ничего не, да. Да, ничего особенного не надо. Да, это дано всем. Да. Да. Ну и ну да, ну, наверное, нет. Мне не дано женскую жизнь прожить. Я не мужчина. Ну, привет.
Hi, and welcome to today's Q. Здравствуйте, в эфире новости Удмуртии, в студии Марина Симонова, и смотрите в этом выпуске. Средства реабилитации теперь можно оплатить электронным сертификатом. Какие он дает преимущества в фонде соцстрахования, далее разъяснения. В республике появится новый индустриальный парк. Проект показали на форуме «Сделано в Удмуртии». И постигать сложное, интересное и увлекательное. В Ижевском детском саду открыли для малышей STEM-лабораторию. Срок действия ПЦР-теста на коронавирус сократили с 72 до 48 часов. Об этом предупредило региональное управление Роспотребнадзора. Соответствующее распоряжение главного санитарного врача страны опубликовано на портале правовой информации. В документе уточняется, что срок отсчитывается от времени результата лабораторного теста. Напомню, в Удмуртии он требуется тем, кто не имеет справки о перенесенном заболевании или сертификата о вакцинации при посещении ресторанов, кафе, массовых мероприятий, музеев, библиотек, торговых центров. Изменение сроков действия теста связывают с появлением новых, более активных штаммов вируса COVID-19. А для людей, имеющих инвалидность, появился новый способ приобретения технических средств реабилитации – электронный сертификат. Как им воспользоваться и какие он дает преимущества, нашим журналистам объяснили в региональном отделении фонда социального страхования.
Совсем скоро Дантесу исполнится 21 год. ДЦП у него с рождения. Инвалидную коляску получает через фонд социального страхования. Замене подлежит каждые 5 лет. Как раз сейчас подходит срок, рассказывает мама молодого человека. Новую решили приобрести по электронному сертификату.
Вот видите, пожалуйста, уже спускался. То есть в каком модельном дали, на такой мы вынуждены ездить. Мы только накачали, у нас вот здесь уже опять они спустились. Поэтому выбора как бы нет. Что нам дают, мы берем, а с сертификата мы будем выбирать то, что нам нужно. Ну пусть она будет дороже хотя бы, я же могу доплатить все равно и приобрести хорошую, которая будет удобна для него и для себя.
Электронный сертификат – это новый способ приобретения технических средств реабилитации, сокращенно ПСР. Ранее фонд их закупал сам и после предоставлял нуждающимся, или инвалиды приобретали на свои средства, а после ждали компенсации, а это могло длиться до 2 месяцев. С электронным сертификатом таких проблем не будет.
Можно сказать, что это похоже на компенсацию, потому что человек выбирает сам это изделие по своим требованиям, по своим параметрам. Но здесь главный основной момент, он не вкладывает личные средства. Он сразу использует деньги, предусмотренные государством. И ограничение здесь ровно такое же, как и по компенсации.
Сумма на электронном сертификате строго фиксированная и индивидуальна для каждого инвалида. Она зависит от того, какие и сколько средств реабилитации ему положены. Цена при этом определяется как и при компенсации по последней завершенной закупке в результате торгов, совершаемых фондом социального страхования. Деньги целевые, и потратить их можно только на ТСР. Выбрать их можно в специально созданном электронном каталоге.
В каталоге ТСР можно посмотреть, выбрав конкретное изделие, где оно продается, пункты выдачи на карте. Можно посмотреть, какова стоимость компенсации, какова стоимость по электронному сертификату этого изделия. И можно сразу выбрать подать заявление, то есть это будет перенаправление на портал госуслуг, где в электронном виде можно это заявление подать.
Этот каталог постоянно пополняется. Здесь есть и отечественные, и зарубежные производители. Если цена на выбранное изделие окажется выше, возможно софинансирование. В этом случае самостоятельно нужно будет оплатить только разницу. Оформить электронный сертификат можно дистанционно.
Заходим на госуслуги, в поиске выбираем фонд социального страхования и здесь выбираем направление на выдачу ТСР или электронный сертификат. Вводим карту НЕФ, это обязательное условие для сертификата. И здесь уже отправить заявление в фонд.
Ирина оформить сертификат собирается в ближайшее время. Сын занимается танцами и играет в боче. Ему нужна особая коляска, и по сертификату он сможет выбрать себе подходящую. Светлана Буланова, Оксана Худякова, Юрий Дроздов, Александр Широбоков. Новости.
Более 50 тысяч домовладений в Удмуртии будут дегазифицированы по программе дегазификации. Об этом Александр Бричалов напомнил накануне во время приема граждан Удмуртии. О сложностях проведения в Дому голубого топлива во главе рассказала жительница Глазова. В прошлом году, по словам глазовчанки, газовики за подключение газа к ее дому запросили более 1 миллиона рублей. В этом году ее дом вошел в программу дегазификации. Документы уже оформлены, работы газовики обещают провести уже в январе.
В соответствии с указом президента Владимира Ильича Путина принята программа, она в республике пообъектная программа догазификации. То есть вот ту самую трубу до границы участка вашего доведут бесплатно. Там соответствующие поручения и министру профильному Ришату Расиковичу Ибрагимову и главе города, чтобы на контроль поставили эту ситуацию и меня проинформировали об исполнении.
Кроме этого, к главе обратились и общественные организации. Молодежь Воткинского района планирует провести в следующем году фестиваль с выступлением парапланеристов, запуском дронов и воздушных змеев. А «Мамы Удмуртии», так называется общественная организация, намерены с начала года запустить новый проект для поддержки детей из неблагополучных семей. Глава республики отметила значимость этих проектов и пообещал оказать необходимую помощь в их реализации. К другим темам. 14 предприятий Удмуртии станут участниками национального проекта «Производительность труда» в следующем году. Сейчас в нем участвуют 50 компаний, 40 из них уже приступили ко второму этапу реализации самостоятельному освоению бережливых технологий. На одном из таких предприятий побывала наша съемочная группа.
Унитарная обработка деталей, то есть эта деталь потом покрывается составом нержавеющим и идет на узел на робот.
Это оборудование, объясняет Максим Гондарев, они делают для нефтяников. Процесс сборки робота очень трудоемкий, но за последние 2 года его смогли значительно ускорить. Помогли технологии бережливого производства.
Сейчас все находится на своих местах, знаем, что где, то есть время уже на сборку деталей уходит меньше часа. В принципе, мы вышли 3 робота в месяц собирали.
А до нас проекта было меньше, да?
Да, было меньше. Ну, там в месяц, наверное, около робот собирали.
Это предприятие одним одним из первых в республике стал участником национального проекта. За 2 года смогли увеличить производительность на 40%. И это за счет внедрения бережливых технологий. Знакомиться с ними начинали на одном участке, теперь осваивают и на других.
Мы планируем все наше предприятие сделать бережливым, и на сегодня мы работаем уже на 3-м участке и планируем растиражировать эти полезные практики на все участки нашего предприятия.
Сегодня у нас в проекте «Производительность труда» участвует более 50 предприятий республики. Не только промышленное, но и строительство, торговли, сельского хозяйства. В следующем году участников станет больше.
У нас 22-й год, это 14 предприятий зайдет в проект, присоединится к проекту. 23-24 должно быть 14 предприятий. Такими темпами мы идем. Большая часть, наверное, да, действительно, это предприятия промышленности, это 3/4, наверное, всех вошедших.
40 предприятий участников проекта уже перешли ко 2-му этапу реализации. Теперь они уже самостоятельно осваивают бережливые технологии. Александр Демидов, Павел Яскин, новости.
В Удмуртии построят новый индустриальный парк. Проект представлен на форуме «Сделано в Удмуртии». Парк площадью 40 гектаров расположится в Завьяловском районе Удмуртии. Строительные работы на площадке планируют начать уже в следующем году. Резиденты парка смогут воспользоваться новым финансовым инструментом промышленная ипотека.
Сегодня, конечно, у нас уже есть первые 3 резидента. Конечно, в перспективе, это готовая площадка сегодня для реализации бизнеса. У нас есть понимание, что их будет кратно больше. Потому что в том числе мы предлагаем такой финансовый инструмент, как промышленная ипотека. Такого, не то что в регионе раньше не было, такого, как нет в стране, можно так сказать. Мы, по сути дела, без банков, без залогов, без каких-то предпринимателей, под их проект строим промышленные корпуса, они получают новые качественные корпуса в собственность и в течение 10 лет расплачиваются с нами.
Форум «Сделано в Удмуртии» в республике проводится 5-й год подряд. В рамках деловой программы инвесторы и предприниматели подпишут ряд соглашений о новых инвестиционных проектах, которые будут реализованы в Удмуртии в ближайшие годы. В этом году общая сумма соглашений, подписанных в рамках форума, составит более 4,5 миллиардов рублей. Робомышь, чудо-грядка, мультстудия. Новые возможности появились у воспитанников детского сада номер 90 в Ижевске. Там открылась STEM-лаборатория. Как современное оборудование помогает малышам знакомиться со сложными инженерными и математическими процессами, расскажет Анна Катарцева.
Давай поменяем направление. Программируют робота-шпиона Майла не взрослые инженеры, а воспитанники детского сада номер 90. Ребята сами пишут алгоритмы, по которым должен двигаться робот, задают ему задачи и вместе находят решение. А благодаря этой чудо-грядке малыши могут увидеть, как из зерен пшеницы вырастает колосок. Естественные процессы, благодаря современным технологиям, ускоряются в несколько раз.
Мы их посадили в пятницу, а на следующую неделю мы ходили, и они все больше и больше вырастали.
Робомышь и робопчела, визиборды, мультстудия, конструкторы. Все это часть модулей образовательной программы STEM. Она включает в себя естественные и инженерные науки, технологию и математику. По этой системе в 90-м саду работают не первый год, а недавно здесь по инициативному бюджетированию приобрели еще одну лабораторию. Теперь малыши могут узнавать даже о сложных математических процессах.
Для развития логического мышления, речи, фантазии дополнительно используются различные типы деталей, и все мы сейчас техническое мышление у нас развиваем в детях, и поэтому здесь вот можно увидеть, здесь представлены элементы линейки, различные поворотные элементы. STEM сама учит работать в команде детей. Они вместе работают в командах, умеют договариваться, находить какие-то пути решения совместно сообща, что умеет вот это именно командный дух.
90-й детский сад стал пилотной площадкой STEM-образования в Ижевске. Первые модули этой программы появились здесь еще 5 лет назад. Сейчас педагоги сада делятся опытом со своими коллегами.
Сейчас у нас 11 дошкольных образовательных учреждений, которые внедряют эту систему в полной мере, то есть все 5 модулей, различные поворотные элементы. STEM сама учит работать в команде детей.
используются различные типы деталей, и все мы сейчас, техническое мышление у нас развиваем в детях, и поэтому здесь, как можно увидеть, здесь представлены элементы линейки, различные поворотные элементы. STEM сама учит работать в команде детей. Они вместе работают в командах, умеют договариваться, находить какие-то пути решения совместно сообща, что у них вот это командный дух.
90-й детский сад стал пилотной площадкой STEM-образования в Ижевске. Первые модули этой программы появились здесь еще 5 лет назад. Сейчас педагоги сада делятся опытом со своими коллегами.
Сейчас у нас 11 дошкольных образовательных учреждений, которые внедряют эту систему в полной мере, то есть все 5 модулей, и составляют такой большой инновационный комплекс. А элементы STEM у нас сейчас используются в 10 дошкольных образовательных учреждений, то есть мы организуем.
Все педагоги, работающие в системе STEM, прошли специальную подготовку. Анна Ковырина, Александр Широбоков. Новости.
Почти 5000 собак и кошек прооперировали в этом году в Удмуртии в рамках месячников по льготной стерилизации домашних животных. Такую акцию провели ветеринары, чтобы снизить число бродячих животных. В этом году ее организовали впервые, но решили сделать ежегодной. Елена Буковская продолжит.
Здравствуйте, мы к вам на прием после стерилизации и на прививку.
Ижевчанка Елена Арефьева вместе со своей пушистой Дусей частые посетители городской ветеринарной клиники. Каждый год хозяйка сюда приносит кошку на прививку, а этой осенью решилась на операцию по стерилизации домашней любимицы.
Кошка очень маленькая, и посоветовавшись с врачом, нам сказали, что нежелательно, чтобы она рожала котят.
Льготную массовую стерилизацию мелких домашних животных впервые запустили в этом году по всей Удмуртии. Проводили дважды.
За 4 недели было стерилизовано и чипировано 987 голов животных, что мы считаем очень хорошей цифрой. А работали и в субботу, и в воскресенье бригады хирургов во всех 4 ветеринарных лечебницах. Проводили в среднем от 30 до 50 операций в день.
Всего за год в Удмуртии прооперировали и чипировали почти 5000 собак и кошек. Самыми активными владельцами домашних животных оказались ижевчане, жители Завьяловского и Сарапульского районов.
Месячник льготной стерилизации, он не только направлен на то, чтобы люди добровольно приходили, стерилизовали, вакцинировали, но и также для того, чтобы создать доступные условия по исполнению обязанностей граждан. Потому что граждане уже начиная с 2019 года обязаны предпринимать, направленные на предотвращение и получение нежелательного потомства.
Массовые месячники в Удмуртии будут продолжать. Следующий планируют на весну. Елена Буховская, Андрей Бусыгин. Новости.
Session of Piano TV. So today I wanted to tackle the topic of moving through method books and grade levels at a really fast, accelerated pace. And I want to weigh the pros and cons of this and share with you some of my experiences from teaching over the last 10 years and what I tend to see in my studio. So let's get started. So this question comes from Ripcon, and I'm really sorry, I probably mispronounced your name, who asks, I am about to finish Alfred's book level 1 in a month and a half. Is there anything I'm doing wrong? Perhaps you could discuss this kind of thing in your next video. I am afraid to skip something important. So I wanted to answer this question, but I've been asked this question so many times and in so many different ways that I felt like it was finally worth talking about. A lot of people will say things like, oh, I'm playing grade 8 music after 2 years, or, oh, I raced through my method books, and I wanted to kind of explain my position on the matter. So a comparison I want to make is with the traditional school system. So here in Canada, the regular school system is 12 years, it's 12 grades, and then there's a 13th year, which is kindergarten. And if you were an adult and you'd never been to school, but you weren't like stupid, you like had some knowledge, but you just never actually went to a formal school, you would almost definitely rapidly progress through kindergarten, the first few grades. And probably by about grade 6, your progress would start to slow down a little bit and it would start to even out. It just depends on, what kind of basics and stuff you were comfortable with. So maybe you could get through, like, say, the first 6 grades of school in like 1 or 2 years, but then it would take you 4 to 6 years to finish the remaining 6 grades of school. I feel like the same thing is true of music. So some people can zoom through all of the beginner stages if they are really dedicated and they work hard, and if their coordination is decent. Some people start out with better coordination than other people. So if your physiology isn't working against you, then you can make this kind of rapid progress, and that's pretty normal. But what I unfortunately see a lot are people who just completely like bypass the entire intermediate range of piano. So it's like they go from minuet and G all the way to Chopin waltzes and nocturnes and like nothing in the middle. It's like from 0 to 100, and they're skipping like all of these years of learning. So that would be like, you know, being in grade 4 of a regular school, being like, you know what, I think I got all the basics down. Time to go to high school. It just doesn't make sense to skip that much learning. So for people who do that, entirely bypass like a big chunk of their musical development, you can still learn challenging pieces. Just like if you were to skip all those grades in school, you could still, you know, study hard and pass and figure everything out. But you're going to be working so much harder because you're going to just have natural gaps in your knowledge. Now, I don't think it's unreasonable to go through a method book in a month and a half, as per your example. But if you were my student, I would have a few questions for you, and we'll talk about these questions one at a time here. But I would ask you how much time you were spending practicing, how long you were working on a piece before moving on to the next one. And I would be wondering too, how well you learned the music. So were you learning it to like an okay level, like 75%, or were you, you know, spending a lot of time really perfecting things, getting things closer to 100%? So for the first question, how much time do you spend practicing? If this was one of my students, I would probably expect the answer to be about an hour a day. Now, the exception to this would be if they are very gifted and just naturally progress through quickly, and that does happen. But the second alternative that does happen too is that there's been some cutting corners and skipping over of things, maybe not putting in as much effort. So that's why that's always the first question I would ask. The next question I would ask is, how long would you typically work on a piece before moving on to the next one? So for a typical student who moves through a method book in 6 months, that might be 2 to 3 songs a week. And for someone who's going faster, that might be 4 to 5 pieces a week, probably even more, depending on how fast they're going through the book. Now, I want to make a note that that doesn't end up translating into learning 1 piece a day. So say you're learning 7 pieces a week. That doesn't mean that it's a good idea to learn 1 piece one day and then start a brand new piece the next day and a brand new piece the next day. You can do that as long as you're going back and playing the first piece. You're not just spending 1 day per piece, because music needs time to marinate. So what you'll often find is that you can learn a piece in a day and play it pretty well, and then the next day go back to it, and suddenly there's like some things that have fallen out of place and there's a couple of rusty spots. And you'll generally find that if you return to the same piece for a few days, you'll eventually conquer those rusty spots. What you want to be able to do is play a piece well on your first try. And that's why I feel like about a week with a piece is the right amount of time for most of my students. And any less time than that, you run the risk of just kind of like glossing over a big part of that learning process. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're learning a piece a day or something like that and just kind of like forgetting it forever afterwards, I would consider that cutting corners. But if you're returning to the pieces you learned for at least a few days afterwards, I think that's totally fine and you're probably doing okay. So the third question would be, how well did you learn the material? Now, do you learn for at least afterwards? I would consider that cutting corners. But if you're returning to the pieces you learned for at least a few days afterwards, I think that's totally fine and you're probably doing okay. So the third question would be, how well did you learn the material? Now, not every piece you learn has to be like a masterpiece, and I don't expect that in my studio. But I would say that like a good rule of thumb would be to learn a piece to like 80% decency, with maybe higher diligence to pieces that you really, really like. So out of every 3 songs a student might learn, maybe 2 of them are around 80% and 1 of them is closer to 100%. The thing is that some people, most people I would say, have a really difficult time with self-assessment. Now, certain things in music are easy to tell if you're doing wrong. Like a lot of people can pick out if they're playing wrong notes, but people tend to have a harder time picking out if they're playing wrong rhythms. So you have to be really, really careful when you're trying to make a decision on whether or not a piece you're playing is good enough. Because to you, you're like, okay, this sounds pretty good, but maybe objectively, there are quite a few errors. And that's why having a piano teacher is so useful, because the self-assessment is really, really challenging. So for someone who's progressing through the books really fast, I would just want to make sure they were being diligent about the details too, that they weren't just kind of like learning the notes and the rhythm and then moving on, but also making sure they're paying attention to like slurs, accents, dynamics, that kind of thing. Because those are only going to get more challenging as the music gets more challenging. So it's important to get a grasp on reading and integrating them in the early stages. So if you thought about these questions and you feel pretty good about them, then by all means, go ahead, move quickly. You're probably on the right track. Just be really careful that you're not letting your excitement and enthusiasm to move on to the next thing make you skip important learning steps along the way. Final thing I want to talk about when it comes to progressing quickly through levels are growth spurts. And these are really interesting, and I usually see them happen with teenage students. Usually with people who've been playing since they were kids or maybe a little bit older. I find that once they hit their teen years, suddenly they're just out of nowhere almost ready for difficult repertoire that they weren't ready for before. So maybe they're playing like grade 4 stuff, and then all of a sudden they're like showing capabilities of playing grade 8 stuff. That's awesome. And my reaction to this is usually to just roll with it. So if it typically takes them about a year to go through a level, we might go through the next year where they're moving through 2 or 3 levels, and balancing that earlier music, like the grade 5, 6 music, with pieces that are going to challenge them more, like grade 8, 9 level pieces. This is a really exciting time for students, because all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm like a real piano player now. But still, even though I kind of work with their growth spurt, we don't skip over intermediate repertoire. That's like, if there's any takeaway from this video that you have, don't skip over the really important basics. These growth spurts also don't usually go on indefinitely. Usually they'll happen like for a year or so, and then they're kind of back to their normal 1 grade a year level. And if you've never experienced one of these growth spurts, some people don't, and maybe you won't, or maybe one's right around the corner. They are really fun when they happen, and don't hold yourself back with music that's too easy when this happens to you, if it does. But just be careful that you're not going so fast that you're skipping over really important stuff. If you go straight from minuet to G to a Chopin nocturne, and you skip out all that middle stuff, you'll still be able to play the notes of the Chopin nocturne. You'll still be able to maybe, play it with some amount of accuracy. But I've adjudicated music festivals before, and the thing that I like, it's always really, really obvious to listen to people who've skipped these steps, because some of the subtlety of playing is lost. It's like they can hit the notes and they can do the rhythm, but all of the interpretation suffers when you don't kind of go through all those training steps. It's something that I see, it's really, really common, like hearing bad versions of popular advanced level pieces. Anyway, that is all for today's Q&A session. If you have a question of your own, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. That's usually where I'm mine for ideas for the next Q&A, which I think we'll do in 2 weeks. So yeah, leave your questions here if you have any, and I will get to them in the next video. Catch you later.
Good. So today we're talking to Nick in Kent. Nick, thank you for coming on. I know you've had a busy time with a family recently, and I think one of them's back to school now, so you've got a bit more time.
Yes, he's back to school. That's right.
Great. Yeah. So thanks for coming on, Nick. I know that it's always hard to share personal experiences like this, but you feel this is appropriate because other people need to hear this. So we're talking about your vaccination history, basically, aren't we? And how you're feeling from that. So timeline-wise, you had an AstraZeneca injection in February, didn't you?
Yes, I was in group 4 because I have a low immunity, but felt fine, was doing fine, really well. Walked to my appointment at the local surgery to have my vaccination, and it was actually just by coincidence my own GP that performed the vaccination, and I sat down and he just ran through his "how do you feel?" and I said really well, and he put the needle in, and I feel like I instantly said it. I mean, my circulation would have been going nice and brisk because of my walk, and I hadn't waited long. The appointments were running to time. So it felt instantly, I said, oh, I've got a strong chemical taste in my mouth. And he just made a sort of non-committal sound. And then I said to him, it felt awkward, we said it. I mean, my circulation would have been going nice and brisk because of my walk, and I hadn't waited long. The appointments were running. So it felt instantly, I said, oh, I've got a strong chemical taste in my mouth. And he just made a sort of non-committal sound. And then I said to him, oh, I feel a bit sick. And he said, oh, you'd better go and sit outside, where they weren't keeping people outside. They'd stopped at that point, you know, the sort of standard wait for 15 minutes. They were sending you home unless there was a problem. But so I sat outside, and I did the usual thing, got my mobile phone out and thought I'll start, you know, replying to messages that I haven't got back to people. And I just felt overwhelmingly sick and rushed to the surgery toilet and vomited. And then a nurse took me back in to see the doctor, and I said to him, I can feel shivers running up and down my body, and it was just like a bam, bam, bam of symptoms that you could argue were unrelated, you know, the shivering and the nausea, and then, believe it or not, I coughed for a bit. I mean, it was just like a checklist of some of the COVID symptoms, or even some of the COVID symptoms we now know. And then my nose ran, you know, just watery, running instantly. But the coughing and the nose running, which they now talk about all the time as being classic COVID symptoms, I'd be surprised if they even lasted a minute or so each, that fast. But it was so quick going through my body. And I can't honestly say at what point my head started to ache, but I had a headache when I was leaving. And they just said, oh, well, you better go home and take some paracetamol and rest. And because I think their main concern was my airway blocked. I didn't feel any swelling of either my lips or my tongue, you know, or my throat. So I couldn't say I felt like that, but I felt dreadful. And I had to get a friend to give me a lift home. And my son was visibly shocked when he saw me, because he'd seen me skip off to go and get it. I mean, and I really had, you know, we're walkers, and I keep fit. And I don't really remember much about how I felt at the rest of that day, apart from I know I felt dreadful. But I do know that, which is far too early for my mum to go to bed, I said to him, come on, let's get you all sorted, and do you mind going to bed early so I can switch everything off and, you know, lock up, and because I said I don't think I can stay upright functioning for much longer. And by that point I was shivering a lot. I didn't have much of a temperature at all, just only ever so slightly raised.
And I just remember going to bed at about 8 p.m. and just curling up in the ball and just shaking so violently and my teeth chattering so wildly that they're just like bang, 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 like that for a long time, almost convulsing, that I was, but it wasn't convulsions. I've seen someone have convulsions and it wasn't that, but that I just thought I'm going to crack my teeth with how violently they're banging together. For a long time, I lay like that in bed until I just fell asleep. So perhaps for an hour or so, I was shivering like that with my teeth, and I genuinely think I exhausted myself with it, and I just fell into a deep sleep. And I don't even remember waking up during the night, even though it was an early bedtime. But the next morning, when I got up, I don't know the exact order of what, there was a lot going on, which makes it really hard to relay. There was an awful lot going on. I had a strong pain in my kidneys, which from that point lasted about 3 or 4 days of drinking lots and lots of water, because I'm aware that that's something you can do for your kidneys. I felt incredibly dehydrated. Now, I know you will probably say if you have a fever, you want to drink plenty so you don't get dehydrated. But with low immunity, I've had many upper respiratory illnesses, just regular illnesses, lots of colds, maybe with a bit of a temperature as well and whatever. And I'm used to managing myself, and I'm used to always drinking lots of water and being well hydrated as an absolute, foundation of getting past any illness, especially if you've got a slight fever. So what I'm saying is it was different. The level of dehydration was absolutely profound. And I looked in the mirror and I felt that even my face looked more wizened, and it's gone back to what I think is how my face normally looks. And my eyes were so dry, they were scratchy, I just was so dehydrated. So something about the process had really dehydrated me. Sweating, because I hadn't been sweating. I don't believe I was sweating through that sleep because, my nightwear wasn't wet, or, had the odd fever where your top's just drenched, isn't it? So it wasn't like that. It was just something internally that had massively dehydrated me. When I got up, I just felt that I was in like a hamster wheel, and I felt that the world was tumbling over around me. And I immediately fell on my bedroom floor and then got myself up again and felt I had to hold on to everything, and I just felt like I was really quite drunk, but not that I was just drunk, but also that when you're drunk, it's in you, but I also felt I was in an environment that was moving as well. So just like a ship, because we've been on a ship, and I know what that feels like when you're in a storm and the floor goes away from under you. So it was like that.
Pretty horrible. You see, that sounds like describing of the stipulitis of the middle ear, the inner ear problem that can make you feel dizzy.
Maybe, but I've had labyrinthitis, which will make you fall off a chair and things, and it's very localized, isn't it? But this.
Yeah, it felt like the whole world was.
Yeah, no, I don't know, but it's localized to everything in my head felt confused in terms of perception, in terms of where things were and my ability to do things. And for example, first couple of weeks, I didn't drive at all because I didn't have control of my feet. So I guessed it would be quite unsafe to drive. Nobody told me not to, but I didn't have proper function of taking my injection was in my left arm because I'm right-handed, and it was my right hand side that's the weakest in terms of losing motor function. which I can't explain that. And tell me, Don, am I right? Are your kidneys on your right?
They're
That's right.
on both sides.
They're on both sides. Okay, the lower
Yeah.
back. Well, I would
So
say
kind of up the back there. Kind of
yeah. Well,
on both sides.
and I have had kidney pain in the past with some hospital treatment that was intravenous. So so I'm familiar with the kind of region. But in that case, then if they're on both sides, it would definitely be more the right hand side, because I specifically remember the pain because it was so. If you have a few days of one localized pain, you just sort of remember it, don't you? It was quite specific.
It's a deeply horrible experience.
It was.
This went on for 2 weeks, or what happened after the 2 weeks then?
Well, it has gone on until now. It is still going on, but it's done is, I would say, life has been so hard to just keep up with because of the physical battles, and also because of the time spent trying to research to help myself, as well as all the normal things in life. So I haven't looked back until today, funnily enough, at any of my notes that I wrote. I had this strong sense, even though I'm a person who's never kept a diary in their life. I was so terrified. I thought I kept a diary, and and look, no, a lot of it is I can't write my hands. I can't control my hands and things like that. But I can't give you an exact time, but I would say so. It was February. Well, I had to have an operation at the end of April, and I didn't know that was a sort of deadline that I had to get myself. This was just personal because I wasn't being told this by anyone, but I thought I have to get myself feeling normal enough to feel safe to have major surgery. It was, that was 10 weeks after the first injection. So I would say I was just about feeling that I was strong enough in myself. I still over my right foot, and I still have a lot of weakness in my right thumb in particular. But in the beginning, I couldn't move my right big toe. I couldn't make it move at all. Whereas now I can give it a little wiggle. And bear in mind, I had full function of everything. And
you're more than that. You're fairly athletic. You fit before this, weren't you?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say athletically, but certainly, I'm 50, and for my age, I'm a fit 50. I just because I try to keep, because of my low immunity, I try to keep myself as well in every other way as I can, and
At the time, did the GP take you? Blood pressure and your heart rate and your temperature and your respiratory rate. They didn't do basic observations.
They didn't want to see me. They didn't want. No. I don't know. I wondered if I could read you something. An email I wrote. Can I try and let me find it? So there's a website I want to give you. Yeah, this is it. Okay. Are you aware of this website, C19vaxreactions.com?
I've heard of it. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not familiar with it. But we'll put a link on it, of course.
There was, yeah, thank you. There's a US senator who I was watching him talk on YouTube, very moving speech, and he was talking on behalf of people in his community who had approached him, I imagine by a sort of MP type surgery, you know, who'd approached him and said that they had had adverse events to whichever vaccine for COVID, and they'd been left in whatever state of ill health, and yet they were finding that no clinician, you know, no medical settings were sort of welcoming them or wanting to help or interested at all. So I don't know exactly what happened to the wife of, I think it might be neurological actually, because of the note I've written myself here after watching the YouTube video. I watched it in early September. They started a private social media group and wrote to the White House and media drug companies. They got no response, felt ghosted, frustration with not being heard. And I know the husband started the website C19vaxreactions.com. And I think they've got, I don't know, they had a lot of people approach them just to tell their stories. And I was in such a desperate situation that I was doing anything at all to try and get someone to help me.
So your GP didn't send you to a consultant? So
No.
you didn't do the basic observations at the time? You didn't check your blood pressure, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, your neurological status? That wasn't done at the time, and then you weren't, when you complained about these symptoms, you weren't referred to a hospital with specialists for an assessment?
No, the GP surgery eventually allowed me to be seen by somebody who doesn't ever work at their surgery, a young doctor who I've never seen again, and so it felt like I was just being passed on to the most junior person or transient person, so they just haven't wanted to know. And I'll give you an example. I was in the GP's this week, banging my head against the brick wall again, and I said that my immunologist had said I should have a booster, and I said, would I have that done here in the surgery? And the GP said, no, really, that's just for older people in the community, you know. And I said, but so and he said, you can go to a vaccination hub. And I said, but I said, and this was after a conversation that was really going badly, you know, in other words, I wasn't getting any help. And I said to him, but you can't have it both ways. You're telling me I'm clinically vulnerable and I've got to get a booster. And I'm so vulnerable, which I don't feel. Well, I feel it from my adverse reaction, but otherwise I didn't.
Mm.
But you won't let me come to my local surgery where it's better. Something goes wrong, you can monitor me.
Medical supervision,
rather than me drive myself somewhere where, because you know, I'd have to get somebody to drive me or something. But you know, it's just upside down thinking. I don't understand it at all. I mean, everything they do, every single thing the GP surgery has done. When I've booked blood tests, I turn up. This has happened twice now since the vaccination. No record of the appointment, and so I stand there and put my foot. It's very hard to think it's not intentional. I can't quite believe it could be intentional, but today I went in again and I checked with the nurse and I said, you are checking for immunoglobulin subsets, aren't you? Because I said, we're trying to establish that I'm not clinically vulnerable, and I said, and if they're normal, I don't see how anyone can say I'm clinically vulnerable. And she said, oh no, that's not on there. And that was left off last time on the 8th of November, so not long ago. It got forgotten last time. So we rebooked, you know, my insistence to have them done this time. And they were doing albumin. What's that for?
Albumin is the protein in the blood.
Right.
It's what makes the blood, it's what carries medicine, it's what carries drugs in the blood, and it's also what sucks the water back in from the tissue fluids.
Right, right.
So it's the amount of protein.
They refuse. I've said time and again, after I spoke to you, I said, please, can I see a cardiologist? I have these racing feelings. I wear a fitness tracker, and I'm kind of used to, what that would be at. And the one thing I've noticed, unlike Kyle, who would be really onto his, whereas really I use mine for steps, just to try and make sure I achieve minimum steps to kind of keep healthy-ish. What I have noticed is if I go upstairs here, it would go really very high, which I think is very strange in a short space of time, given that I used to. Flights of stairs in the gym before, on the stair machine before the pandemic, and obviously I haven't done that. But what I have done a little bit strangely with the lockdowns and all the rest of it is I've had a
We're back.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on. It was just a flick off the internet. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, I had a goal of 30 flights of stairs a day. So what I'm saying is, it's not as though you could say, oh well, perhaps you're just noticing because you're going upstairs, but it's one of the little fitness things we've done in the home gym, if you like, of the house, consistently. And so I have noticed swings in my pulse, and
it goes up to a very high rate,
well, I wouldn't know a high rate from a low rate, unlike Kyle, who knows,
I see.
Fitness stuff. But for me, it seems to go in one flight of stairs, which is about 12 stairs. It'll go up to 125. Does that sound a lot? So,
it's much higher than you would expect for your level of fitness.
Yeah, whereas in the gym, when I used to do my 60 flights, which was a killer, constant like this on the machine, I used to stop. My heart was super fit, but I used to stop at about 140 because I was advised in the gym that that's a good kind of place to, you don't want to over exert yourself. So
you you've lost your exercise tolerance there. Your heart rate's going up disproportionately to the activity you're undertaking.
Exactly right. And in fact, I would say, as a self-preservation sort of feeling inside me, I feel I have no ability to exercise at all. And because I used to run as well, and I don't feel that it would be safe. When I walk up a hill, I'm clutching at my chest, you know, the pain, and then I stop and I have to go. I just make this up, you know, but I'm a great believer in instinct in your body and things, and I just go, you know, and that's what I feel I have to do, and I just until the pain subsides.
So you get pain when you walk, when you start exercising, you get pain. Where do you get the pain from?
There.
Right, so left side of your chest.
Yeah.
And what sort of pain is it? Is it like a gripping pain, or is it sharp pain, or?
That is sort of sharpish, but it's not like these little pinches that I get now. But it's sort of sharpish, but it's a frightening pain. It's a pain that makes you stop and think that's not right. That's all I can say. I've never had a heart issue in my life, and it's a frightening pain. You just know it's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, this merits a cardiological assessment straight away, doesn't it?
John,
you should see a cardiologist straight away.
I've never been a hypochondriac. I've never imagined life is too busy, and I'm really, really lucky. I've cried a lot since all this happened because of the torment of medical people not wanting to help. You know, the absolute torment of it, and the frustration and the fear that there's something wrong with me and nothing's being done. And I've also felt, so I feel quite ashamed, and I try not to be emotional.
It's fine.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Sorry to put you through this.
Sorry. No, I'm just thinking about Kyle. I've also felt, and I feel guilty about this, but sorry. I felt quite envious of all these people that you talk to who at least are getting the tests and the help, because I don't know, certainly my GP surgery, it's been an absolute turning their back. They do not want to know. I've had so many conversations with them now, and when I say so many, since February, I'm talking maybe 8, okay? I'm not obsessively phoning them every week. You can't get through, but when I've had those conversations, and I've probably only met face-to-face with them 4 times maximum, and bear in mind, the first time this junior doctor, she said to me that she thought it would be a good idea if I bought crutches, you know, and I did go online then to buy crutches, because I couldn't make it. She was right at the end. She's being junior. They put her right at the far end of this great long corridor, and it was a really long way to walk. And I was just tipping to the right all the time. So what I'm saying is, they've seen me really bad. I can't remember what I was saying about it.
And the suggestion was to get crutches.
Yeah, the suggestion was to get crutches, but they won't look, and they won't. And I go in and I say, and I was very much, you know, you spurred me on. I don't mean that as in you're sort of influencing me, if you like, John. I don't mean that, but I mean you gave me, just when no one else has wanted to know, it was such a positive thing that you were even interested. And sorry.
I mean, to me, these are red flag symptoms. I worked after I retired from academia. I was a staff nurse for 3 years on a part-time on an accidents and emergency department. And if a patient said to me, I've got left-sided chest pain that comes on when I exercise, and I've got pain now, I would go and get a consultant straight away.
Yes.
You know, there's no question. And then my consultant would almost certainly get the cardiologist straight away.
Yeah.
These are red flag symptoms. I just don't understand why they're not meriting getting the attention they deserve. These need need an immediate specialist diagnosis.
Yeah, well, the other thing is that something that came on latterly, you see, they say, oh, but you were fine with the Pfizer, so you can have a booster. But I don't actually, who's qualified to say I was fine? Because what I know is, a week later, the chest pains really kicked in more.
So you had the Pfizer in June.
In June, yes.
Could you just clarify, Nick? Did you having the chest pain before you had the Pfizer?
Yes, I had the chest pain instantly from the AstraZeneca.
Yeah, you were getting that before, yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed to get worse
And it peaks and troughs from February with the AstraZeneca. Never went away, but I certainly didn't exercise because I was working to walk. My son, because he was off school, we were walking, but it never went away. The GP has said, oh, you're fine, and so is the immunologist, without even seeing me, said, oh, you're fine to have a booster. But I said, when you say that, how can you know it's safe for me? And I said to the immunologist, because he's in London, I said, you haven't even seen me for 2 years, because prior to the pandemic, they used to insist, which I was a little bit baffled by, they used to insist they had to take all my bloods, my immunoglobulins, lymphocyte subsets, everything at King's, every 6 weeks. And I was trekking up and down this every 3 weeks for 6 or 7 years, okay? Pandemic came, suddenly, no, it's not important, we don't need to see, which has been many people's experience, more or less, hasn't it? If you've got something, a sort of ongoing, something that they think needs to be monitored, and then all the hospitals closed down. But I've actually been fine, and I haven't had any intervention, medically or anything, and I've been okay, and I believe I've had COVID at least once, right at the beginning, or maybe twice, and I also had the toes, John, because I phoned up my GP in March 2020 and said, I don't know why, but my toes gone. Yeah. So I really think, and I'd had it prior to that, so I think that's why I only had the toes and a headache. But we didn't know about that then. It was just an odd thing. But anyway, sorry, going back to
this is 11 months before the first vaccine, isn't it? Before you had the infection 11 months before.
Yeah, and then 11 months before, and also even before they even really say it was in this country, because I was hospitalised with not being able to breathe, with low oxygen, and it was a really strange illness, and a lot of people around were strangely unwell, which looking back it looks, and then I haven't gone.
And then March, from my memory, was quite a feasible time to have had it.
Oh no! Prior to March, it was September. But I looked on a proper legit website, and there was an unknown SARS-CoV thing in Ashford in Kent, which is where we were sort of having a lot to do with.
I mean, the full history of this is not written, Nick. That's for sure.
It's not.
It's a lot we don't know, certainly.
Yeah.
Have you ever had blood tests to determine whether you actually did have COVID? Have you ever had the antibody tests?
No, but when the first GP gave me my AstraZeneca vaccination, he said to me, don't know why I'm doing this, because you probably won't make any antibodies anyway, meaning because of my low immunity, because I generally have a suboptimal response to vaccines. However, the thinking was that you might as well, it's safe, and you might as well go for it anyway, because you might make a few. So I was perfectly happy. I paid for an antibody test in the end of March. So it was halfway through February when I had my vaccination. So it was a good time period for me to have made antibodies. And I had made some antibodies to the AstraZeneca. I'm presuming it was to the vaccine.
Yeah, it will be. That test will be antibodies to the vaccine.
Well, no, they said that it was in a clinic, and they did say, I can tell you the clinic, I know it probably means something to you, but it was a proper one where they drew blood. But they did say the specific test I had, although it cost a lot of money, it couldn't actually tell you whether the antibodies were from it was method. Even I had heard. So Roche, ECLIA,
Right. So but they said it wouldn't differentiate between antibodies from the virus and antibodies from the vaccine.
Most likely, though, given that I think I had COVID late 2019 and then March, April 2020, I don't think my antibody, because they say, do they still say that you don't keep your COVID antibodies for long?
Yeah, the antibody test may not after about 6 months or so.
Yeah.
But the point is that these reactions could be caused by all your memory cells.
The B and T cells.
The B memory
Yeah.
cells, yeah.
Which I choose to believe mine are good of those, because nobody's ever told me they're not. I might not make excellent antibodies, although I did make a few to this, but in general I may not make have the biggest antibody response. But there's nobody who's ever said, no immunologist has said to me your B and T cells aren't functioning correctly. So yeah, I think you're right. I think I have got natural protection.
Yeah. But going back to when you first had this first AstraZeneca, and you got this taste in your mouth. Do we know if the GP aspirated the needle or not?
We absolutely didn't, and I think the problem with GPs doing it is that generally they don't dole out the injections.
No, but very often they don't. I think there's a
Exactly.
financial incentive at the time.
Yes, yeah, and he just literally puts it in, done. Very quickly. Wouldn't even, I don't think, given that I've got a fair sort of narrow, I want to say flabby, but that's a little bit unkind, but I don't have a firm deltoid muscle there because I hadn't been doing my usual swimming because of however long a year of lockdown, so the leisure centre had been closed down where I used to swim all the time. So my muscle tone had gone in my upper body, and the stairs wouldn't help that, would they? So
No, not really.
no, and I hadn't done anything with weights or anything. So I'm just saying, I think he would have struggled to find a, he may easily have missed them.
The muscle growth.
Yes.
You see, if you get a reaction straight away like that, to me it can only be one of two things. It can be that it's gone into a vein, it's gone to your heart in seconds, or it can be an allergic reaction that can be that quickly.
Yeah.
So they were worried about your airway. That's probably why they were worried about your airway. But that was okay. You didn't swell up. Your breathing was fine.
Yes.
Did you get any itching at the time? Do you remember?
No.
Right.
I'm not an allergic type person.
So an allergy didn't normally get itching.
Yeah, every day I had the mildest allergic type reaction, which was every afternoon for about the first couple, my lips would start to sort of just swell a little bit and feel a bit tingly, and then that would go down. And that was I just saw that in my diary today, but
this was in the days after, it wasn't at the time.
Yeah, no, in the days after, for about a couple of weeks, but I certainly didn't have a big allergic reaction. And I would say, John, I can only speak for my local surgery, or actually also the hub where I went for my Pfizer. It seemed very much that all they're looking for in terms of adverse events are those type of allergic reactions.
Yeah.
And so my immunologist drove me to distraction the last time I had a telephone appointment with him, when he said I could have the booster, and he said, nothing you say gives me any because I talked to him about exemptions, and he said, nothing you say gives me any reason to say that you should have an exemption because you're not allergic. So
this was a consultant, and he was only thinking in terms of allergies, nothing else.
Yeah.
So it's just so disappointing, isn't it? Just so hard to explain. I think we conclude that metal taste was because it inadvertently went into a blood vessel, and that.
Yes.
That was a big variable in what's caused these problems.
Yeah.
I really wish people would start listening to this. And, I have the same frustration. I've written to my MP. He wrote to Nadeem Sahari. I got a letter back from Nadeem Sahari, the vaccine minister, saying, don't worry about it, John. All works to that effect.
It's like a moment of comedy gold. Your video when you throw it over your shoulder, the letter. It's really funny.
That's all the use it was, I'm afraid.
Right.
Tell us how you're feeling. Tell us how you're feeling now.
I feel unsafe. I feel hounded by got to have a booster, got to have another, and I don't feel that it's. I think because the other thing that we haven't mentioned, because I think it's unfortunate I've had so many symptoms, but I think there were two things going on, because I also had prior to any talk of blood clots or anything like that, a sort of searing pain down the side of my nose and above my eye.
This was after the AstraZeneca, wasn't it?
After the AstraZeneca, and I've never had any kind of headache like that. And it's written down, thankfully, the locum at King's, my immunologist who I've seen for 10 years, who is an honorary, high up lecturer in immunology, bags of experience. The minute he heard that it was an adverse reaction to the vaccine, he and the team passed me on to this student who then rang me up, very, very nice young woman, but no experience whatsoever in immunology, But what she did for me, which I think is an important thing, is she at least wrote down all my symptoms that I was relaying over the phone.
Yeah.
And when you read them now, it's quite chilling, because I can just see it here. She says that, and bear in mind, okay, I'm not imagining this because I'd heard about these, what are they called, cerebral venous, the nasal.
Cerebral sinus venous thrombosis.
Yeah, sinus, that's it. I have never had I don't really get sinusitis, certainly not like that, maybe the sort of dull headache up there with a really stuck cold type thing. But I've never had a pain like this in the side of my nose and above my eye. And so she wrote this list of symptoms from King's Immunology, but this locum I won't. Immunology registrar. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, registrars are quite senior. They should be, registrars are not junior doctors.
She told me she was new, and she didn't. But well, even so, I've been there 10 years. I've never, I sort of know the main ones.
Sure.
But anyway, she, I'll read what she said. She says, and this was with me pushing, and this is dated 26th of February, so just under 2 weeks after my vaccination, and to my GP surgery. I'm writing to kindly ask you to evaluate this patient who reported multiple symptoms which started immediately after having the COVID AstraZeneca. They are profound and getting worse. The symptoms are struggling to control her arms, hands, legs, distinct taste in her mouth which comes and goes. Now that was different. That wasn't the chemical taste still after the 2 weeks. That was a kind of sweet taste that I had developed, which sometimes I still get. It comes back again, less and less. Have you heard anyone saying?
No, I haven't. Not an ongoing sweet taste.
No, not an unpleasant taste,
Not normal.
No, I've never had that. But if you think COVID does affect people's taste and smell, doesn't it? So maybe something in the mix that, again, because it seemed to bring out these symptoms of COVID. Anyway, difficulty to, that was, good. You see, I haven't read this because, as I said, I've forgotten this. Difficulty to swallow was so frightening, not because it was swollen, but just because I'd lost a lot of control of my muscles. And she's put, although the patient is able to drink fluids, eat food without choking, coughing. Well, you only have to choke and cough once, don't you? Especially when you're on your own with no husband, and just a child in the house.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a silly thing to say, because she said to me, well, have you choked? And I said, no, but I'm very frightened. I said, I go to swallow, and the Adam's apple sort of thing won't, it moves down, doesn't it? But it won't do that. And
it sounds like a loss of neurological control, doesn't it?
But lots of sharp pain in the left side anterior chest. Don't know what anterior means.
Anterior means front as opposed to posterior.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Dry, sore eyes, decreased control of whole body, more pronounced on the right side, impaired balance. The patient reported that she was about to fall down the stairs. I actually did fall down a couple of stairs, but there was one time where I just completely sort of lost my bearings at the top. And I've lived here 10 years. Yeah, but I did nearly. I just saved myself from falling down the whole flight of stairs. Headache, complaint of kept bumping into furniture. I've forgotten, you see. So my motor skills have improved with work, just with keep trying. Feel like I'm being pushed over all the time. Urine is darker. Knows she needs plenty of fluids. Reported loss of power in hands. Could not write a letter. I tried to write a letter to my aunt because she doesn't do anything technical, and she'd sent me a get well card, so I tried to write her a little note back, and I found that I couldn't hold the pen properly. Hand felt exhausted up to her shoulder with messy handwriting. Feels fatigued and exhausted. Does not think she's able to have a stable walk. Not able to walk normally. Bear in mind, I was saying to immunology, who've had me in their care when I've not been as ill as at this point, wanted to see me all the time. They didn't want to see me, and it just seems balmy. But pins and needles in the legs and arms, and cramping pains in the legs, and that was strange because when you're swimming a lot, which I've always loved swimming, sometimes you get cramp in your calves. But this was a new cramp to me of cramping in my thighs. I've never had that in my life, and jumping of my muscles in my thighs, particularly on the right hand side. That was a horrible cramp, and it kept happening, and bouncing, jumping muscles in my body for no reason, but particularly.
Did your muscles feel like they were kind of flickering on a muscle?
Yes, when I would lie down at night, I was listening to someone else actually. Do you know Dr. Mobeen?
Yes.
Yeah. I watch a number of his videos. Sorry, John.
No, it's fine.
But he interviewed someone actually who had the tinnitus, which I would say to you I didn't have. However, what I had was just this. Again, it's like a bit. It's probably not very helpful to a clinician like yourself to say this, but when I would lie down in a quiet room at night, my whole body felt like it was going, just the whole length of my body, my arms, my everything. And in the first few weeks after the vaccination, I obviously didn't even think of having a drink. Because I felt so unwell, so I just wasn't in that frame of mind. I was surviving, literally on survival mode. But when I first, I like a glass of wine at the weekend. And when I really am not a big drinker, but I do like a glass of wine at the weekend. And when I had, when I opened a bottle of wine for the first time, and then the weekend after, so I sort of see a pattern. I thought, aha, this is right. I noticed that on the nights where I'd had a couple of glasses of red wine, so Friday and Saturday, let's say, and then my bottle was finished until next weekend. I'm quite disciplined.
Very restrained,
Yeah, very restrained. But I noticed that this great jangling of all of your, the nerves are so noisy, everything's buzzing, like my whole body's buzzing, and it's a horrible feeling, but I noticed it was kind of damping down a bit. And I remembered I knew somebody who had an essential tremor, and she said to me that, I remember that from years ago, she told me this, and she said, of course, it's not a good thing to drink red wine, but if I do have a glass of red wine, I find that my tremor isn't nearly as bad.
And then you found that it seemed to dampen down the symptoms of it.
Definitely, but yes, so I didn't have tinnitus, but
because it all sounds so neurological, because obviously alcohol is going to inhibit the functioning of the nerves, and it's all considered. This just demands a neurological opinion from a senior neurologist. It's such an obvious referral.
immunology, I felt, first of all, that given that I was under the care of an excellent immunology team, I felt they should be looking at, and I, put it in writing to them at the time, that they should be looking at what it is in my particular immune system that has allowed the safe vaccine to affect me so catastrophically, and it was utterly terrifying. But they immediately said, no, you tell, and they wouldn't even, in the past, for things that I have felt are so true, they've passed me on to different departments at King's, let's say rheumatology or whoever.
Which is what you'd expect.
Yeah, they wouldn't even do that. They wanted to delay things. This is my interpretation. They say to me, we want to delay your care. But what they wanted to do was write to my GP surgery and then wait for the GP surgery. He told me they had a 3-week admin turnaround of receiving letters, and then they scan them through their system, and it's just so to say to the GP that they should make a neurology referral. And when I spoke to this sort of transient GP there that I got to see about that, she said to me, well, you're looking at a sort of 6 to 8 month wait before you see a neurologist. Because she said, yes, and you won't, what if you go any faster? And when I battered down doors to speak to a GP recently to get these blood tests, and to say, could I please see a cardiologist, having spoken to you, John, she said to me, we'll get a chest x-ray. I didn't really feel that would necessarily help my heart.
I wouldn't have thought so.
No. And she's quite an experienced GP. I feel it's very difficult not to feel they're prevaricating. They're doing everything bad. And I said, yeah, cardiologist, my heart hurts, And then under great pressure from, no doubt, a really irritating patient sitting opposite you, a patient who's demanded for once not to just talk over the phone, but to actually mean. They were already irritated that I'd said I had to be seen in the surgery. She then organised this, and you'll correct me on it, I never know which it is. Is it EEG or ECG when they put the list?
ECG, electrocardiogram. Or they call it AKG in the States. ECG.
Oh, do they? ECG.
Yeah. ECG.
Which 2 weeks later, that appointment, then I turn up for it. Oh, no record of that. No record of your appointment. And I absolutely, and this has happened so many times. And so I said, well, I'm not leaving. I said, I told a white lie. I said, I can't come on any other day, and it has to be done. And so then the nurse came along and she said, well, I'll do it quickly. And I said, well, I don't want it done quickly. I want it done how it should be done. I said, I don't know how it should be done, but I want it how it should be done. Anyway, she sat me down because I'd waited because I didn't have an appointment. So because I'd waited a long time, I was in total resting mode. I'd been sitting there, made me wait about 40 minutes because there was no appointment for me, so they were doing me a favour and fitting me in, even though I had an appointment. And she then spent quite a while, as anyone would, sticking all these stickers, on your wrists and I think on your ankles or something, and, several on the front of my chest.
6, yep.
And that took a little while, as you'd expect. And then she said, done. And I said, what, have you done it? She seemed to have literally switched the machine on. And she said, it's just a snapshot. And she said, yes, in 10 minutes time you could have an event, or 10 minutes previously you could have an event. But she said, this will tell us whether you've had a severe heart attack. And she said, I've got a 30-second snapshot.
Well, that probably is right. It just take about 20-30 seconds to record it, yeah.
Right, but she said you're normal. So
well, who's she?
The nurse. She said it looks normal.
Well, you would normally get a senior doctor to interpret an ECG.
Yeah, but is it possible, John, that you could still have myocarditis or pericarditis, and that ECG would look normal, or is that?
It depends how experienced the eye is that's looking at it.
Right.
I mean, to diagnose those conditions, you want probably more sophisticated tests, yes.
Yes.
But I mean, just to say that an ECG is normal, it's not. You know, there's still, it's only one of several cardiological investigations. It's the first one that you always do, but you always get. I mean, I used to record, you know, on A&E would record a dozen ECGs a day, no problem at all. I would always look at them, of course, but you'd always get a senior doctor to sign it off. It's not.
Yes.
You know, it's not a casual thing. It's not like taking someone's blood pressure and just writing it down. It needs an experienced reader to diagnose from. And even those, if the doctors there weren't sure, they get a cardiologist to look at it.
Yes. Well, she said that looks normal. Those were her words. She said that looks normal, and then my feeling is that looks normal is the end of it. So I said back, because obviously I'm getting belligerent now. I said to her, but it's not normal what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. So even if that, I'm not disputing, that may look normal, but
it felt dismissed.
Well, yeah, yes, absolutely. And I don't know why that. I feel that it's going to be left so long that the next thing I'll be told when I eventually see someone is, oh, you've developed this recently, you know. But the only thing I've got in my defence there is that I've consistently had. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's really not. Yeah, oh, it's very difficult to feel that it's very difficult. It would be easy to just put your head down and walk away and go, okay, then I'm imagining it, you know.
Well, I think you and me both know that you are not imagining these things. These are genuine clinical features that you're describing.
Yeah, and also, John, the sharp pain when I breathe in, which is in the upper left as well. I've never had that before in my life. I don't know why it hurts to breathe in. And when it was at its peak a couple of weeks ago, everything slightly fluctuates. You know, it doesn't all stay, but the heart pain never goes away. Sometimes it's more severe, other times. But since February, it's never gone away. I've never been without it. But the breathing in. So therefore, I was breathing in a really shallow way because it was hurting to breathe in. You know.
And again, this is a classic clinical feature that everyone learns. You know, if you get a pain when you breathe in, you know, it's usually the membranes round about your lungs, a pleurisy, or the layer round about your heart, a pericarditis, and you would investigate to find out which one it was.
Yeah, and that the pain when I would breathe in wasn't here or here, it was here, you know, so it was just in that one region. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just so frustrating that you just basically undiagnosed. We've got all these clinical features, but we haven't got the consultant to say what they put them all together and say what they mean and order the extra test to make a diagnosis.
No, I think there's a real, I don't know what it is. I think that the GP surgery and the consultants that I have encountered are somehow not wanting to look at vaccine issues.
Yeah, it sounds a bit inconvenient to look at vaccine issues, I think.
Yeah. Do you you were saying